Hello, and welcome to the BG Gamer Deck Rental Series. If you found this series by scanning one of the QR codes located inside one of our deck rentals, thank you for using our service. If you did not find it that way and are considering our service, or just happen to stumble across this video on the internet and are learning a little bit more about how to pilot this type of deck, welcome too. This video will show the basics of how to pilot a modified yellow starter deck. Now, before we jump into the content of this video, I want to talk about what it is not. This video is not meant to be a how to play. It is not meant to teach you from going from absolute zero to fully piloting at an TCG Con 10K. This video assumes that you know the basics. It assumes that you understand how the stack works, that you at least played one game of Vibes TCG in paper, preferably, and it assumes that you understand at least a little bit of the meta. There's also going to be some reference to certain cards you might want to look out for in matchups, and this assumes that you also have access to be able to know what those cards are or a prior knowledge thereof. If you are looking for a video that explains the basics of how to play, there is one available on our YouTube channel. However, I don't recommend that. Personally, I think the absolute best way to learn to play is by attending a Learn to Play event at an TCG Con or a local game store. If that option is not available to you, you can watch the video on our website, although all it really does is take you through the online tutorial. That being said, if you want the practice, download the game yourself, run through the online tutorial, and get all the basics of how to play. Additionally, you can always practice online, or if you're lucky enough to have someone in the area that plays, play in paper. It's the best way to learn. Now, this modified yellow starter deck has been something that we've developed on this channel over several weeks. The premise of the deck is essentially to do what the yellow starter deck does, with cards like Extrovert Penguin, Flying Penguin, Penguin Who Zooms, and of course, Penguin Who might bring a +1. These four cards interact with each other in such a way as to 1. Build up your vibe counters on your Extrovert Penguin, 2. Provide cheap penguins that can come out quickly for growing your Extrovert Penguin or winning early vibe checks if that is your goal. Penguin Who Zooms allows you to bounce the balloon penguins, allowing for extra value on your extrovert, and then of course, Penguin Who might bring a +1 might get you another penguin. Some of the modifications in this deck are the addition of cards like Not Your Keys and Yum Yum. Not Your Keys is in there as a target spot removal if your opponent has a penguin that is giving you a particularly difficult time getting through. And Yum Yum is the alternative win con of this deck. Allow me to explain. This deck contains 4 Yum Yums, 4 copies of Penguin Who Doesn't Mind Goodbye, 4 copies of Lucky Penguin, and then 4 copies and an additional 4 copies respectively of both Glass Act and Half Past Chill. Now the interactions here are pretty simple. However, the nuance of when it is appropriate to use them is where things get complicated. So, Penguin Who Doesn't Mind Saying Goodbyes reads, whenever another yellow penguin in your huddle is iced, draw a card. Lucky Penguin says, whenever this penguin is put into your ice from play, you may pick a yellow penguin card in your ice with vibe 2 or less and put it into your huddle. Both Half Past Chill and Glass Act are relics that say, when this relic enters play, choose a penguin and put a vibe counter on it. So the idea of this deck is to do exactly what standard yellow decks do, to get your extrovert out quickly, to grow it big, to win vibe checks. It is also great at putting a lot of small things on the board. However, the problem with that is if your Extrovert Penguin dies to spot removal, if it is iced early, or if you just don't draw it, what do? That's where this backup comes in. So the idea here is that you get at least 2, preferably 3 of your payoffs on board and then board wipe with Yum Yum. Your payoffs are the Lucky Penguin, the Penguin Who Doesn't Mind Saying Goodbyes, and your relics. Preferably, you're going to want one of these 2, as the Lucky Penguin and Penguin Who Doesn't Mind Saying Goodbyes are the better payoffs. The relics in and of themselves don't necessarily do anything, they just hang around after the board wipe as they are relics and not penguins. So the idea that you want to look at, and the timing restriction you need to be worried about with this, is 1, you want to wait until your opponent is about to win. You want to wait until they're right on the cusp of getting the amount of permanence that they need to win. It can be worth board wiping a little early if you are worried that they're going to target one of your payoff penguins and mess up the sequence of how to do this. So, with 1, 2, or maybe even 3 of these on board, you're going to use all of the yellow pudge that you have available to you and board wipe with Yum Yum. When you do so, all of the yellow penguins that get iced will draw you a card based on Penguin Who Doesn't Mind Goodbyes. If you have 2 of them on board, double that. plus they count each other, although they do not count themselves. Lucky Penguin will get you an extrovert back from ice if one got iced early and you don't have access to it. If not, it can grab you almost any of the other small cards, such as Penguin with Balloons or Penguin who might bring a +1, just for some extra value. Additionally, as mentioned before, the Half Past Chill and Glass Act are relics, therefore they do not get iced from the board wipe. So you can keep them around and they will count towards your total permanence count. So that's it. That's what the deck does. It's very simple. You try to get your extrovert out and win vibe checks. You try to fill up the board very quickly with yellow penguins. And if that's enough, you press on to victory. If it's not enough, you board wipe, reset, and then with the extra cards in your hand and permanents that either return from ice or are already on the field, you can then build up again and hopefully achieve victory. Some supplemental cards in the deck, just to help it function a little more smoothly, are Prepared for a Wild Night. This allows you to look at the top 5 cards of your deck and put all action cards revealed into your hand. The rest go on to the bottom of your library. This is only going to find other Prepare for a Wild Nights or Yum Yums, as there are no additional actions inside of the deck. The deck is very straightforward in its game plan. Additionally, there's a playset of Dima the Destroyer in here. This is a green card that you can flop it, choose a relic, and ice it. This does 2 things for the deck. One, a deck like this absolutely folds to a card called Colosseum. That card only lets you play from the top of your library. And so if you've just board wiped and you now have 13 cards in hand, you want to be able to play those cards. And so Dima the Destroyer is in here so that if Colosseum is facing you down, you can play it from the top of your deck and be able to get out of that gridlock and play the rest of your hand. Additionally, you can play it early before a board wipe, although there's very niche cases for that. One of those niche cases is if you are playing a deck that also runs a lot of relics and would not be hurt by a board wipe as much as you would like, you can play Dima and start getting rid of their relics, forcing them to play penguins in order to have their permanent count up, and then eventually board wiping with that. Or just getting rid of the relics altogether and eventually winning with your extrovert. Additionally, there is 1 copy of their twins in this deck. This card is simply in here to get you an extra little who zooms if you need to push in for that last little bit on the next turn. If you just need a little bit more on your extrovert to get that last vibe check and end the game. There is also 3 copies of Trampoline Rod and Bounce House Rod. These cards don't serve much in this deck, and you'll actually find them in very, very few meta decks. However, in this deck, they are extremely useful. 1, because Bounce House Rod allows you to get a penguin that you've dropped back to your hand, which allows you to continue a sequence with extrovert to grow bigger. And then 2, Bounce House Rod, since this deck does sometimes win early on vibe checks, gets you a Yum Yum out of your rods, because having that in your hand is very, very important. And if you rod 2 or even 3 of your Yum Yums early, then you don't have an option to board wipe, and that lets you have that option. This deck was designed to be extremely simple. This is one of the easiest decks to pick up. Actually, as it currently stands, there is exactly 1 person who has rented this deck from me, and that person played their first ever SCG event. It was their first day ever playing Vibes, and they made top 16 with this deck. Now, obviously, I cannot promise results to anyone. That is not a guarantee. It is up to you to pilot it. The deck is simply there. But, like I said, it is a very simple deck to learn. It's a very simple deck to figure out the little nuances. And as long as you're aware of things like Colosseum or Popcorn, you can do pretty well with it. Thank you for watching. Jump cut, jump cut, jump cut. So many jump cuts. Now before we jump into the contents of this deck, full disclaimer, this video is not meant to be a how to play. It is not meant to take you from starting at absolute 0 with Vibes into a SCG 10K. This video assumes... Hi, Bubby.